started with scaled agile. We've been hearing a lot about scaled agile framework for last few years, and in next coming few slides we'll basically be unboxing SAFe, trying to understand what is this SAFe all about. So just before getting into SAFe, just a little bit of warm up on agile itself, because without having an idea about agile, I think getting to know SAFe would be unfair practice. So what is agile? Agile is a lightweight framework for delivering real product early, and this product can be a software, this product could be a hardware, this could be a piece of IT service, this could be an infrastructure piece, or even this could be now used even in areas which are non-IT as well. But the whole intent is that we want that product to be delivered early, and we also want that product to be constantly getting updated quite often, and at the same time without compromising on quality. So that's what actually the whole purpose of lean as well as agile has really been into. Agile is iterative, incremental, and adaptive. These are the three key important aspects of agile. What do we mean by iterative? We basically are talking about doing a large engagement project in form of small mini projects, which we call it as iteration, and that's why we are calling it about, instead of basically bringing the whole project in a particular 8-month, 9-month, 12-month scale completion, we basically are planning to do it in form of small iterations, or also we famously call it in Scrum as sprints. So you're doing it in small iterations, and at the end of each of these iterations, what we basically are talking about is delivering a small piece of increment which customers should be able to use it into production, that is potentially shippable in form of a more of a kind of a minimum viable product. And the most beautiful part, which is the third angle, which is adaptive. That's what basically makes agile unique, because what was happening in past was that the customers were not able to basically kind of request changes when the project was going on, and even if they were basically requesting these changes, many times the project timeline used to basically get extended because of these, because they had to go back, correct the design, do the planning back again. So there was a lot of these back and forth happening, and because of this there was very little opportunity to adapt to the new changes which customers had in mind. But agile basically gives us the flexibility of adapting new changes in between. It gives us the flexibility of understanding the lessons learned at the end of each iterations and incorporating these learnings in the next part. So frankly speaking, agile is more focused towards the whole goal, that is what we believe is the Pareto rule. As you know, in Pareto rule, the whole fundamental is that 20% of the work generates 80% of the value. If I have to just give you a small example, if you take a net banking application, in a net banking application, we're talking about, while we have so many features, how many of us really would use all those features? We hardly use primarily 3 or 4 features, that is fund transfer or net banking or seeing the statement or probably applying for a checkbook. But there are so many other features like personal loan, bank loans, demat account, open a stock exchange account, do a kind of a mutual fund transfer, and hell lot of things are there which we hardly use. And that's where basically agile is going into. It's saying that if that's the case, why do we really have to talk about developing everything in one go, but instead rather our whole focus is around is that developing things in pieces where we deliver the important value to the customer first, and then we go about delivering as the customer requires keeps changing. We basically change our priority. So agile basically helps us respond to changes, and we actually welcome changes, which what basically makes agile unique. It is whole focus is around getting the minimum viable product out as quickly as possible, so that we can address the important aspect, which is the time to market. And another important reason why customers are going for agile is because it helps them fail a bad project much early in the life cycle. So if the project is a bad project, if the team is not really performing well, or if things are really not going as per our expectations, they actually fail fast. And that's what basically agile helps us with. So moving quickly next to before to SAFe, a quick recap on what was life before agile. So life before Agile in most of the organizations still who do not use Agile as a project management methodology, both in software or in case of IT services, is typically mostly people follow is waterfall. So as you can see on the screen out here, waterfall basically is where we used to do things in step form. We used to spend some time on planning, then we used to spend again few months on design, build, test. In this whole cycle, when was the customer able to really see the system, the actual system for which he is really paying for, the working piece of software or the working piece of IT service or a system? He was only able to see it somewhere at the time of UAT, which used to happen in the test phase. So that's basically like we are talking about during the unverified system time. So during all that time, the customer was not really having the visibility, and at the end of the 80% project time completion, that is when they used to get to see what they really have paid for. But unlike that, in Agile, the benefit what we basically give to customers is that we basically break this whole product into small pieces, where we basically go by the concept of minimum viable product, where we are basically doing enough planning to get that minimum viable product, get the design done, build done, test done in form of small iterations, or also called as sprints. And then what we basically are providing to customer is a increment, which is nothing but a potentially shippable product, or you can, which can be basically deployed to production if the customers want. And this basically helps them keep ahead of the market timelines. Like, as you know, in the present situation, the most important for customer is all about time to market, and that's why more and more customers are going towards the agile software project management delivery model, whether it is for software or for IT service. So that's where, as you can see in this here, the customer basically gets to see the final system towards the end in the waterfall. But whereas in the agile, we basically are able to deliver incremental model over period of time, and at the same time, while we are doing iterations and while we are basically getting increments at the end of each iteration, we also have an opportunity to basically adapt, where we basically are able to change the project requirements as per the priority of the customers, and also learn from the mistakes which we have made in the previous iterations and move forward. So now quickly moving on to scaled agile framework, or in short what we call it as SAFe. So what is actually SAFe all about? So SAFe, firstly, it's a freely available framework from scaled agile which helps implement agile methodology at enterprise level while effectively using principles and practices of lean and DevOps. So as you see, there are other statements as well, like what as per scaled agile, the definition is SAFe for enterprise is a knowledge base of proven integrated principles uh, and competencies and practices for lean agile DevOps. But in short, to be very, very frank, the typical word here we really have to understand is the agile methodology at enterprise level, because the challenge what we've been basically seeing in the present situation is that while a lot of organizations are going about adopting agile, and they have actually successfully adopted and implemented agile methodology in their organization, no doubt about it. And to make agile possible, they are using, mostly our people are using Scrum framework, or some of them are using extreme programming, or there are some other frameworks which are not so popular which people may be using, but either it's Scrum or it is extreme programming. So when they basically are using Scrum or when they're using extreme programming to make agile methodology practically possible, one of the major challenges which they are basically seeing over a period of time is that as long as the project is small, if you're doing small projects which requires team size of 10 people, 15 people, 20 people, or okay, let's say 30 people, the Scrum framework is absolutely working fine, not an issue at all. However, as the project teams are increasing beyond 50 people and so, now what we are basically seeing is that managing these Scrum teams itself is becoming a problem. And that's what we basically are going to see in the next coming slides on how Scaled Agile framework is basically addressing that. So it is basically helping you to implement agile methodology at an enterprise level, where we are talking about multiple small scrum teams, and in this way we are also able to take care of another very important part is uh, involving DevOps. Because while we have multiple teams, each team is basically generating increments. Now these increments basically have to be integrated. We want to ensure that we are having proper system demos on time, and this we want to get it done at lightning speed. And that is where basically SAFe does a very beautiful handshake with the DevOps, and also uses the lot of important aspects of lean to ensure that the flow is basically moving to the customer as soon as possible. So how is SAFe different from Agile framework? So as I mentioned to you, the base of, first of all, what we need to understand is SAFe is not contradicting Agile. Absolutely not. SAFe is one of the frameworks of Agile. Now we had these first generation frameworks of Agile, which we used to call as Scrum, extreme programming, or we were basically kind of iterative programming. So these are more of kind of, or Kanban, which are, or Scrumban. These are more of the first generation frameworks of Agile. Now in the second generation frameworks, we are basically talking about scaled Agile framework, or we're talking about less, or we are talking about Nexus or DSDM. Now these frameworks are the next generation frameworks which are targeted towards, once an organization has built a strong capability around Agile, now we are seeing projects running Scrum properly, they're able to execute projects properly. But now the next challenge, which, so if you see the bottom layer out here, this is the section which I'm talking about. So here now, let me just put the spotlight, give me one moment. All right, okay. So if you see the bottom level, which we're talking about, the team level. Now this is something which Agile has always been doing. So we've been basically taking care of this particular part already, that is through Scrum. So we were basically getting the requirements from the product owner, the product backlog was being maintained, and as part of this, there is to sprint running, each sprint having the daily stand-ups, and we were basically able to get this increments. Now, this is absolutely perfectly fine. But now when these teams start increasing, when you have these multiple Scrum teams start existing in the IT environment, then the next level challenge, when you're basically building a product which is involving more than teams, 5 teams or 10 teams or 15 teams. Now, when you're basically talking about 10, 20, 15, 30, in some organizations, we are also talking about Scrum teams which go as high as 100 teams as well. Now, in this scenario, what we basically are talking about is a very difficult condition on how do you basically manage these teams. And that is where basically SAFe proposes a more of a kind of an enterprise model, where they basically break up this whole thing into 3 layers. Actually there are 4. I'll come to the what the other one is. While I've not mentioned the solution level out here, that's because it's intentional. I'll talk to you in the next slide, but primarily we are talking about team level. So now in team level, while we are talking about multiple teams, now the major problem which we are saying is the coordination between the Scrum Masters, the coordination between the product owners. Because when a product is large, when we are having large number of Scrum teams, the biggest challenge which we now start seeing is that the requirement management being done effectively by product owner, that is not really happening. Scrum Masters are not able to coordinate with each other as well, and apart from that, the teams themselves are not in sync with the other Scrum teams, and because of which, what are we really seeing? We are seeing n number of integration issues coming up, system demos not really happening properly, while individually the respective increments are working very well. But when these increments are basically being wanted to get integrated, and when we're looking at doing a system demo, things are really not working out well. And that is where we basically have the second level in SAFe, which we call it as the program level, where we basically introduce a concept of agile release train. Now this agile release train is where we basically are talking about like kind of a coach in a train, where each coach is basically representing a one scrum team, and like that you have multiple coaches in your train where multiple scrum teams are working together, and these teams basically are getting together. We basically are having an opportunity for them to get together so that they can do effective iteration level plannings. They can basically do a kind of a proper understanding on what are the various dependencies among each other's teams, and then it also gives them an opportunity to work towards a final consolidated demo, which we call it as an IND demo, and then we basically are able to generate a larger program increment. And then take for example, if you are having even more larger product, like take for example, if you're dealing with a product like SAP implementation, and when you're doing SAP implementation, you will basically have in SAP, you may have one track which is HRMS implementation, second could be account receivable, third could be account payable, fourth you may have general ledger, then again I may have a payroll. Now while I'm talking of different uh, programs running at part of my portfolio, and under this account receivable, again I may have end up having 3 or 4 scrum teams, and that is where we basically are talking about at a portfolio level. We're talking about multiple uh, multiple programs being managed at a portfolio level, where we basically are having a one larger solution or one larger product which is effectively being managed at a portfolio level. Or any other example could be even apart from SAP implementation, we could talk about simple Microsoft Office as a product. Now Microsoft Office, if you know, is a collection of multiple applications in itself. So we are talking about Microsoft Excel, Microsoft Word, Microsoft PowerPoint, and now these could be multiple programs which basically are rolling up as multiple trains at the portfolio level. And each train, and let's take for example in Microsoft PowerPoint itself, which is one train, you may basically have multiple teams taking care of multiple features of Microsoft PowerPoint, where one person is basically talking about taking care of the document tab or second review tab, or we're talking about the security tab. So like that, you can have multiple teams coordinate with each other. And another important part is where we basically are trying to build up a more of a management structure in place here. So we are next slides will actually talk about different roles, which basically helps you do effective enterprise management when you are doing the projects using agile frameworks. So this is the scaled agile framework latest 4.6 version from scaled agile, where we basically are having 4 different configurations of safe which an organization can adopt. Now we're talking about a configuration where you may just basically have at the complete ground level, where we are talking about the team level, where we are assuming that there are multiple scrum teams working for a single IT service or a single product, and they basically have for 3-4 teams, possibly may have a common scrum master. There may be a product owner for 3-4 teams, and each of these teams are still following the routine cycle of scrum, which is they are doing the sprint planning, they are doing the sprint review, they are doing sprint retro, they have daily stand up, they maintain their own Kanban board, and they basically are continuously doing each of their sprints. But now if you basically move one level above, which is basically where we are talking about the program level. At program level, what are we really talking about? We basically are talking about a new role which basically Scrum SAFe introduces, called as RTE, which is Release Train Engineer. Now Release Train Engineer is basically nothing but a chief scrum master. So he's a chief of all the scrum masters. So basically we are talking about multiple scrum masters reporting to this release train engineer. Similarly, when we are basically talking about having multiple product owners, we are talking about another title, which is basically nothing but the product manager, which is a part of the product management team where all the product owners would report to. So product managers basically having multiple product owners reporting to them. This product management may also consist, apart from product manager, it may consist of titles like business analyst as well as part of that product management group. And then we are also talking about another separate entity, because larger the number of teams, it becomes very, very important to ensure that we are adhering to the architecture, and at the same time also taking care of the system integration, which is very, very critical, because when multiple increments or packages are being delivered as part of Agile, this is where we basically are talking about a competency community of a practice, which we call it as a system and architectural engineering team, which basically is constantly, whilst the teams are delivering these iterations, and as part of these iterations, as they are delivering the respective increments, these are basically getting consolidated, integrated, and you are basically constantly performing a system dev. And apart from this, the very, very beautiful part is that every 8 to 10 weeks, they basically arrange a kind of a PI planning, which basically is one of the very, very important part of SAFe, where every 8 to 10 weeks, at the end of 10, or some organizations also do 12 weeks. So yeah, but the most preferred one is basically the 10 weeks window, where the 2 weeks, 2 weeks, 2 weeks. So there are 4 2 weeks sprints, and then for next 2 weeks we have something called as the uh, PI planning, where the whole 2 week window is referred as the innovation and planning window of 2 week. So it's an IP iteration which referred as innovation and planning iteration window. And during this, you basically are having getting together all the Scrum teams together for a 2-day window to do planning for next 2 months. At the same time, you are also taking a consolidated program increment demo, which we call it as the inspect and adapt session. And then there is an opportunity for teams to perform learnings, continuous improvements through programs called as hackathons and innovation. And this basically is getting an opportunity for customers to get together. So like that, we basically are talking about having at a team level, then we basically are having a proper management at a program level. And when we are talking about multiple programs existing, then we basically are also having a third configuration, which is the portfolio configuration. And then there's a fourth configuration, which we basically are, the third one, portfolio, basically was also taking care of the epics. So the program is taking care of features, whereas the portfolio is more worried from a epics point of view, where epics basically leads to features and features leads to user story. What we basically are talking about in large solution is when we are talking about a solution which is quite large enough, it may basically not be different products, but it may just be basically a large solution in its own. In such a scenario, you may want to go for the fourth configuration as well, which is a large solution. Otherwise, mostly the preferred one people follow is team, program, and the portfolio layer. Moving on to the next one, which is again the unique part of SAFe, is we refer it as is the ART, Agile Release Train. As you know, this particular angle is specifically being shown in the area of program. So as multiple Scrum teams are generating increments. Now these increments, which are continuously getting delivered by these teams, they need to be basically integrated. So here is where we are talking about the continuous delivery pipeline. And this continuous delivery pipeline is effectively made possible using these agile release train concept which we have in SAFe, where continuous exploration is what we are talking about, the case where teams, the individual Scrum teams, are getting the requirements from the respective product owners, and these Scrum teams are basically executing these requirements during their respective sprints. And as their outputs are getting generated, we basically are talking about using various DevOps techniques. So here is where we basically are using the concept of DevOps, where we basically are effectively using the concept of lean as well to ensure that we remove all the bottlenecks, where we basically are able to ensure that how the value is getting stopped. So we use this concept of value stream mapping to ensure that wherever there are basically bottlenecks, wherever there are basically kind of situations which are basically delaying this, wherever we are seeing causing extra lead time or cycle time can be basically improved. Here the whole concept is to automate the integration process. So using tools like Jenkins, we're talking about tools which could basically be helping you to do automated testing like Selenium. We are also talking about deployment tools like Chef, Puppet. The whole concept here we are talking about is that a situation, an ideal situation where the moment a developer has basically finished the development and delivered a potentially shippable package, we are looking at a ideal situation where they should basically be just be able to do a one-click deployment, where once they basically the package is out, they should basically say, go ahead, perform the integrated build, perform the integrated test, and deploy it into production. And that's what we basically are talking about, continuous deployment. And once it's deployed into production, we basically are talking about a situation where we are talking about release on demand. As you know, earlier release management always meant deploying into production. However, situations have changed now. We're talking about cloud coming into picture. We are talking about basically having infrastructure where we basically can have a kind of a system which we refer it as a kind of a blue environment, green environment, where we basically have the replica itself. So this basically is giving us an opportunity to ensure that we basically are deploying things into production but releasing it when we really want. So release to the customers when you really want to, but have it deployed into production. And the advantage you get basically is, as part of this, is that once it's deployed, you get an opportunity to again test it into production as well. So if anything is actually gone wrong, it's much easier to roll it back. And once everything is basically in production, at the time of release on demand, we are just basically talking about the aspects of feature toggles. So just enable the feature and customer basically gets to see it into production. So here is where we are talking about a continuous delivery pipeline, where we are effectively using the concept of agile. We are using CI/CD, which are concepts of basically DevOps, and we also are basically effectively using the concept of lean to understand where are the bottlenecks. So you concepts of value stream mapping, the concepts of 5 why to resolve problems at earliest. So what are the benefits of using SAFe? So benefits of using SAFe are, we basically are first of all talking about, and please note guys, this is not my feedback, this is the data collected by Scaled Agile itself from multiple organizations. Every year they basically collect this data from the organizations which have implemented SAFe, and they actually have said that customers are saying that we have more than 10 to 50%. In some engagements it's been 50%, but in some cases it's at least minimum to minimum 10% happier and more motivated employees, because SAFe gives a very beautiful opportunity to engage the employees with the customers, with the stakeholders, with the architects, with the scrum masters, product owners in much better manner, using these concepts of PI planning meeting, using the concept of inspect and adapt. So engagement is actually helping. Second, time to market. Organizations with larger products who are basically were having larger teams, one of the major issues they used to face was basically unable to get to the product delivered into the market quickly. But now people have at least minimum to minimum seen 30% faster time to market, and on a higher scale as high as even 75% time to market. They are able to basically get the products into the market at a very rapid space. From a quality point of view, there has been much lower rate of defects now, where minimum to minimum organizations are reporting that at least it is reducing 25%, and on a higher side even as high as compared to 75% defect reduction compared to the engagements which were basically not having SAFe before. And from a productivity point of view also, here we are seeing a 20 to 50% increase in the productivity compared to waterfall engagements and others. some of the other benefits. So this is definitely the real-time pictures which I'm talking about here. The first one is basically the PI planning meeting. So as I mentioned to you earlier, SAFE has one of the very unique meeting which they usually conduct at the end of basically after 8 weeks, or in some organizations after 10 weeks, where which we call it as a basically a PI planning meeting, which happens during that innovation and planning uh, iteration, which is a 2-week iteration, where there is this 2-day window where all the scrum teams get together, either at a physical location or through video conferences. If you are basically spread across multiple locations, then you can basically use this video conferencing facilities, and they are basically getting together to plan for what they think will be able to do for the next 8 weeks, or for next 4 iterations, or for next 4 sprints. And during this, they basically are getting to have everybody over there, that is basically the development teams from various scrum teams. We are talking about architects, we are talking about customers, we are talking about stakeholders, we are talking about product owners, everybody available for this 2-day window, working together and finding it out what they would do. So that's why if you see, once the introduction is done, things are explained, they actually get a very clear project vision and planning for what they would really want to achieve in next 4 sprints. And once they have a clarity, they go back to their desk and start basically creating a proper release plans for their particular scrum teams, and they're working together trying to basically prepare their breaking their users to features into user stories, and then connecting it with the various dependencies. And if they basically believe there are dependencies, this is where, if you see the third aspect, at a program level and at a portfolio level, we actually are having Kanban boards which are very clearly saying which is causing dependencies, which is supposed to be done later, which are the various risks at a program level or at a portfolio level. So actually gets a lot of things clarified, and that's what basically is the beauty why more and more organizations are now preferring to use SAFE, because when you have larger teams, collaboration is very critical, and the techniques and the meetings and the events which are proposed by SAFE basically makes this really practically possible. And also the type of Kanban reporting which they're talking about makes information much easily available and accessible to all of the team members who are basically part of a particular project. So quickly moving on to the next part, which is who is using SAFE. Now I'm telling you guys, this is still a small list. This is just a selected few list which we are talking about, very big brands, but the list is much bigger. And as you can see on my right side, a huge organizations from government of America are basically using SAFE. They really are finding it very important. So whether it is a social security administration department, or whether it is basically the Department of State or Department of Justice, lot of US government organizations are now preferring SAFE, Scaled Agile Framework Enterprise, for their project management work. And apart from that, we are talking about much larger organizations like HP or Johnson and Johnson, or we're talking about Philips, we're talking about Westpac in Australia, or we're talking about basically Capital One, Accenture, or in European region, we're talking about AstraZeneca, which is a pharmaceutical company, or Air France, KLM, or we're talking about, and again in Australia, the Australian Post. These are a lot more organizations. And to be very frank, the typical ideal customer for SAFE are basically those organizations who have already initiated the agile journey. So they have implemented agile, they have started using Scrum or extreme programming, whichever framework they like, and now they basically have started seeing the fruits of agile. But now the next catch which they're basically facing is that as the number of teams are increasing, they are unable to do effective management. They basically are not able to control the integration issues, the system issues which we are facing. And that is where basically SAFE now takes care of that. So please note, SAFE does not mean it is not including Scrum. So SAFE includes Scrum, SAFE includes Kanban, and apart from that, it also takes care of aspects of DevOps. It is also taking care of aspects of Lean. So basically SAFe, when you are implementing, it is understood that Scrum exists, it is understood that Kanban exists, and on top of that we basically are adopting many more management, enterprise management activities, followed with integration with DevOps, which basically makes software project management or an IT service project management using Agile much easier. Future of SAFe. Now, what are you seeing on the screen is a latest 2019 report by basically the State of Agile report. So there's this 13th annual State of Agile report, which is an American association which basically generates this every year. And the complete report you can actually download if you want from going to Google and typing for 13th annual State of Agile report. And in this, basically, I'm primarily interested to showcase to you their feedback and suggestions on what is the future of SAFe. And as you can see, with the data they collected from various customers, stakeholders, and not just one geography, they basically have covered almost every geography in the world, whether it is America, South America, Europe, Asia, or New Zealand and Australia, Africa. They basically gone to all geographies, and as you can see clearly, SAFe is emerging as one of the top leaders in the future. You can see 30% of the organizations are proposing that if you basically are planning to scale Agile in your organization, if you want to basically expand the usage of Agile in your organization, where you want more and more project teams to adopt Agile, then you basically will have to go towards SAFe. While as long as you have small teams, yes, you may stick with Scrum and that may do out well. But the moment you're talking about having larger Scrum teams across your organization, then SAFe is the way to go forward with. Quickly moving on to the important topic, which I believe a lot of people might be interested out here, is what are the various SAFe certifications available from Scaled Agile. SAFe basically offers multiple certifications. However, the most popular one, which most of the people go for when we talk about SAFe certification, the first one is basically the most popular, which is basically called as Leading SAFe Agilist, in short called as SA. So Leading SAFe Agilist, which is a popular training, which includes certification. All these trainings basically includes certifications as part of the course. So once you basically enroll yourself for these certification, the certification is basically part of the course itself. So apart from that, there are other popular courses. Apart from Leading SAFe, we are talking about SAFe Scrum Master or SAFe Advanced Scrum Master or SAFe for Teams, SAFe DevOps Practitioner. Primarily, most of these which you are basically seeing on the screen on the left hand side are a 2-day program, and then there are some other programs as well, certifications available as well, where like if you've been playing a role of Scrum Master for quite some time and you've started managing multiple Agile release trains, then for you have certifications called as SAFe Release Train Engineer, SAFe POPM, which is a product owner, and PM, which is basically the boss of product owners. And we're talking about for leadership who are actually playing at the job, who have SAFe implemented, and now they are playing critical role in the portfolio layer of SAFe. For them, we have something called as SAFe Lean Portfolio Management. People who are part of the architecture team of SAFe, where the responsibility is all around architecture, system demos, and administration. For them, we also have certification called as SAFe for Architect. And then there is this another curriculum, which is basically a 4-day program, which is primarily for those people who are actually completely into the core of the SAFe from start till end. So there is this something called as SPC as well. So quick question on what could be basically helpful for people when we are talking about so many SAFe certifications. So here is again a recommendation directly from Scaled Agile, where, as I said, there are some core courses which basically they call it as the core. The green color one are the core courses, where the first one, executive managers, delivery managers, senior managers, team leads, most of these people usually go for is the certification, which is basically called as the Leading SAFe. But however, if you are someone who is a hardcore product owner, who basically is the one who actually is writing the requirements for the customers, converting these requirements into epics, and then breaking into features, and then from features breaking into user stories. Then you may also want to go for the certification, which is safe POPM. Or if you're looking for a job of a scrum master whose job is to basically ensure that iterations are effectively running, where you can act like a coach, you can like a protector, facilitator, then you can go for say scrum master. For people who basically are part of the agile team, so who are basically not playing managerial role but at a complete lowest level, you may also want to go for another certification which was introduced by safe uh, just this year, I mean end of last year itself, which is called as safe for teams. Earlier people used to just go for leading safe, but yeah, since last year end they have introduced safe for teams, which is more focused around non scrum master, non product owner activities. And then for people who are actually helping these agile teams in doing continuous integration and continuous deployment, for them we also have courses like safe DevOps and all that. Then we also have other courses like safe release train engineer, which is primarily for those people who are scrum master certified, and once the scrum master certification is there, now you're going to the next level RTE, then you may want to go for those ones. Moving on to the next slide, which is where I'll basically hand it off back to Sunil, and if there are any questions, I'll be happy to take. So over to you, Sunil. So
Yeah,
I'll just
thanks a lot. We're just running a small poll. If the participants can quickly check on one of the boxes, we're just quickly doing a poll.
Okay.
Okay, we're going to close the poll quickly. All right, so moving forward, we want to have a quick discussion, quick update on the whole business transformation journey, whether it is, whichever version of Agile we are using, whether we're using Safe or using Scrum or using any other version. We are saying there are typically, looking at the way it works, there are typically 5 stages or 5 steps that we really follow from the whole Agile transformation, business transformation journey. The first step is obviously awareness. People should know which agile to work on, which would be the best practice to work really on, depending on your current requirements. Like as you were mentioning, if it's distributed, then safe works better. If it's more in a single location, multiple location, then maybe the other Scrum versions would be better as well. So awareness in terms of what is agile, what's your current circumstances, what's the setup, and that helps you really decide in the next step forward. The second stage, or the second step as we call it, is the assessment in terms of where are we now, how much agile we are already following, what are the principles we follow, what all areas of automation we already do, and so on and so forth. So you do some kind of a quick assessments, which some organization call it discovery workshop, some call it benchmarking, etc., etc. But the idea would be to understand where do we stand, what's my as is state in terms of the various aspects of agile. And then you can even go into multiple maturity details. When you do benchmarking, you benchmark your processes as against the best in the industry, whether it is global or US or local India. So that benchmarking would give you maturity, and then obviously whatever elements is missing, you like to implement them. You'll create a kind of a roadmap which would be short term, medium term, and long term. You don't implement agile overnight. It takes time to recreate those procedures. It takes time to get automation done. It creates time to get the mindset of people changed. And I think that's where most of the effort on agile is going nowadays. It's not on the technology, it's not really on the process, it's more on the people and how they would change the way they think. So assessment gives you a lot about that. And then you get into the design and the documentation part in terms of what will you do, how will you do, who will do what, kind of a stuff, right? And it goes from top down as well and bottom up. Top down in terms of you need to ensure accountability at every stage. It also needs to do a little bit of as we say, handing over the baton to the next in line as well. So a lot of accountability goes to people. A lot of decision making happens at a much lower level and not always at the management layer. Collaboration is very important. How do you work together? What kind of design elements are you bringing in so that people can collaborate, teams can collaborate, not just in one location but multiple location across. And obviously you need to also understand the benefits that you will have at every stage so that you document it, and then you also display and demonstrate improvement in terms of either cost, time, go to market, etc. And that brings the whole team together. So design and documentation is still a blueprint. It's not yet on the ground, but it's still a blueprint. What will you do? How will you do? Who will do it? And so on and so forth. Then the fourth stage basically gets into the real hands-on, the real on the shop floor, the implementation part, which is where whatever you plan in your design, you start implementing. If it is to do with collaboration and technology collaboration, you'll set up those bases there. If it's to do with let's say continuous release and continuous deployment, as I was talking about, you need to have those tools to be able to do that. He talked about Jenkins and Puppet and Chef, and obviously DevOps has an overlap there. So what would those tools be? How would you implement them? And where all would you implement them? So that's where the implementation, the real hands-on stuff starts. And we've in the design, we looked at potential benefits, and post implementation, we should see real benefits, and we should document real benefits and then get into the next sprint. So obviously implementation is not in one shot. That also goes into phases. You need to look at low hanging benefits first, and then get into more critical, more deep dive, more long term benefits as well. And the fifth stage is basically continual service improvement. This is a term borrowed from service management. Basically talks about how do I ensure that the next wave of improvement takes place? How do I ensure that I stabilize what I've implemented and then look at the next level, in the next cycle of improvement. And each cycle should really make me much more agile, makes my business agile. We should be able to take decisions fast. We should be able to go to market fast. We should be able to collaborate faster, and so on and so forth. And CSI brings a lot of credibility and accountability to the people who are actually on ground and implementing agile. So these are basically the 5 stages, as we call it. I'll go a little bit into each one quickly for the benefit of time. So again, first step is awareness, where people should know what agile is, even if you're not really in IT, but you should still know agile, because agile can be used anywhere. That IT is supporting, IT is supplementing business, each elements of business, whether it's finance or HR or production or whatever that may be, depending on what your business is. Everybody should get the basic idea behind agile methodology and how people are really using it. Assessment, as I said, is more in terms of what will work, what will not work. I've used the word enablers and disablers here. There is a concept called force field analysis. Again, it's not purely a safe term. It's a generic term for understanding. In any consulting implementation, you use these terms. So you look at what are the enablers, you look at what are the disablers, and see how you need to, tone down the disablers and scale up the enablers. In design, we're looking at blueprint, we're looking at success criteria, we're looking at KPI, we're looking at roles and responsibility, we're looking at collaboration, we're looking at engagement, we're looking at communication. So the last portion of communication and engagements are pretty critical. As I said, most of the business transformation on agile, we have basically faced major issues on the people front, not too much on the process, not too much on the technology, not too much on any other aspect except the people aspect. They don't want to collaborate, they don't communicate properly, and it takes too much of effort to get them to work together, and in the same business objective. And obviously, implementation is the execution of blueprint. We're looking at impact from a theory to practical. We need to communicate success, and we need to prepare for new capabilities. So stabilize the new, the old cycle, and now look at the new one. And obviously, CSI is more on success failure analysis, learning from the past. If, as you know, agile, one of the major issues or one of the major important thing is fail fast and release fast and implement fast. So as long as we find out it's not working, but we need to make a quick change it and go forward. The next sprint planning, any changes in the blueprint, any communication strategy change, and so on and so forth. That brings me to the end of the 5 stages. I'll have Weber do a quick poll, and I see some questions, but we'll do a quick poll on the second one, and then we'll get into Q&A quite fast. So just spend the next 30 seconds to 40 seconds, just say yes, no, whatever you feel. And then we'll get into questions very, very soon. Okay, I have, while the poll is running, but I have a lot of questions here, and what we could do, if Vijay, you're okay, I will select some of them are common. I will select some of them, and maybe, you can answer them specifically, because some of them, or most of them are typically on the SAFe and the Scrum aspects. Is that okay? I pick it up and you can answer?
Absolutely, Sunil, I'm ready.
Okay, so one of the questions that is asked is, from the industry acceptability point of view, how is SAFe? What the question is, from the acceptability point of view, what is getting more mileage? Obviously, this is a question which came before you showed the rest of the world figure, but the question was, what is getting more mileage really globally, SAFe or Scrum, and probably why?
Okay, so thank you, Sunil. That's a good question. And firstly, as I mentioned to you, for your organization to do SAFe, Scrum, or the competitor of Scrum, which is extreme programming, they are mandatory, which means definitely if you have to start running, you have to first implement Scrum in your organization. So yeah, so Scrum definitely is very, very important. Without having Scrum in place, you cannot think of doing SAFe. So that way, yes, I would say Scrum is important. And once Scrum has implemented successfully in your organization, you have started realizing that yes, now we have multiple project teams following Scrum as the agile methodology. Next, that is where once you start seeing multiple teams working out on a similar product, then in that case you will have to go for SAFe. And that also only in situation where you basically are talking about a product or a project which is requiring more than at least 30-40 plus people. But if you're talking of an organization which is having project teams lower than 30, then Scrum will definitely take a higher upward front. But the catch is, given my experience, I have started seeing now that organizations are having larger products, and plus 50 team strength is now becoming quite common for various products which they are maintaining or applications they are maintaining. So very soon after the Scrum, 2 years or so, once an organization is implemented, they will definitely go for SAFe. Next question.
Okay, thanks for that. I have one more question. It says, what is the key metrics to understand the SAFe is operated effectively? What are the key metrics to understand SAFe is operated effectively? This is from Venkatesh.
Okay, Yes, thank you so much. That's a good question. Again, what are the various metrics which we basically are talking about in case to get to know if whether SAFe has been really implemented successfully or not. So here we are basically are talking about two types of metrics here. Number one, metrics which we are talking about for to finding it out whether the implementation of SAFe itself has been done properly. So for this, we are talking about metrics like number of projects in the organizations which are basically uh, adhering to SAFe compared to or projects which are basically not adhering to SAFe. So this is one percentage which you are constantly looking at to understand if really SAFe is being implemented in the organizations or not. Second metric in that same line of era, you basically are looking at now more from a value aspect is that reduction in the time to market part. So where we are talking about basically like, because end of the day, after implementing SAFe, if you're still not seeing reduction in the basically from the time a customer gives you the request, so from the time you have accepted a requirement from the customer and from the time you basically have released it into production, if that particular time has not decreased, so that particular total lead time reduction is what we basically are talking about. If they are not seeing a lead time reduction, then again we basically are trying to basically fool ourselves. So that is again another important metric which we basically will be looking at. Some of the other metric also which we basically will be looking for is more from a kind of an agile perspective, where we'll be looking at metrics which are related to aspects of large solutions or program metrics, which could basically be like what are the various features we planned for versus the features which got actually implemented. We can also look at some other metrics which is more around basically the what you call velocity aspect. We can also look at like how's the velocity of the team, and what was the planned velocity versus the velocity which was actually achieved. We are also looking at various metrics which is by like how many features were planned, how many features got accepted, how many stories planned, how many stories accepted. Then also from a quality point of view, did we see defects reduction? Did we basically find percentage of test cases automated? So these are some of the various metrics which will basically give us an angle from a quality perspective, process perspective, and also metrics from an overall implementation point of view as well.
Okay, thanks, Vinay.
Next question.
One question which is pretty closer to me, and that is also come out, is what are the critical human elements, soft skills element, which are very important for the success of SAFe?
That's really a very nice question, Sunil, because the catch is one of the important aspects of SAFe, if you see, is something about we basically call about is the lean agile leadership. That is what the whole SAFe implementation sits on, which is at the base of the SAFe implementation, which we call it as the lean agile leadership, where we basically are talking about that if your organization has to basically be successful on SAFe implementation, the first important part is that how is the leadership mindset of your organization. That is why one of the important aspect which SAFe always talks about is that if you are looking at the people part, if you're looking at the OCM angle, that is organizational change management, that is people willing to accept SAFe in your organization, the first thing we will have to do, and which is muchly needed, is that you basically have to get your leadership team onboarded, where we are talking about developing something called as lean agile leadership, where we want a leadership who believes in the concepts of lean, which means which actually is thinking that lead time is a problem, which basically believes that yes, we are living in an era where if you are doing an implementation, like if you see so many organizations still continue to deploy changes into production once in 2 months, once in 8 weeks, but those times are changing. Those times are absolutely changing. Organizations like Amazon, they do deployment every 5 minutes. Now where is 5 minutes and where is 2 months? So first of all, they basically need to understand is that we have to generate value by removing these bottlenecks, by removing these problems. And to do that, they will have to adopt basically concepts of continuous delivery, which is whole focusing around ensuring that we're able to do continuous integration and deployment. So that is one important aspect. That is basically you'll have to build up the strong lean agile leadership itself. That is why for them we are talking about basically certifications like Leading Safe, which clearly coaches them, explains to them the importance of SAFe, how SAFe is to be done. It grooms them on the implementation. It also covers some of the important aspects that Sunil has covered, if you remember some time back, talking about generating awareness, basically then performing assessment, and then going about doing the designing of the SAFe. Because if you don't get the SAFe design right in your organization itself, the fourth part, which was implementation, that is actually is not going to happen. So through the safe leading agilist training, you basically get the agile leadership on board. And apart from that, then the second part would be basically also having the next level, where start basically engaging your team self to start adopting safe. So once they basically start attending, I'll tell you, like, so many people resist about safe, but the moment they attend the first PI planning meeting of safe, their response totally changes. The kind of interaction they get to do during that PI planning meeting, where they are basically able to speak to product owner, scrum masters, stakeholders, architect, system team, the kind of collaboration happens, that itself gives them the immense motivation. So many times we see people, they are developing something and absolutely they do not have any clue. They are only working based on whatever the project manager gave them. So project manager told them do this task, they do that, and that's it. But when it comes to safe in PI planning meeting, they actually get to directly speak to the product owners, the stakeholders, on what is the vision, what are the various activities. So that actually helps them groom better, and that way you will actually see acceptance of safe will be much higher in the organizations once people start getting engaged into the events which are basically conducted by safe. Over to you,
Thank you, Vijay.
Sunil. Any other question?
There are lots more questions. I don't think we will have time right now because unfortunately we started a bit late, and our apologies for that. What we will do is we will share those questions with Vijay, get his response, and we'll respond back to each one of you. Some of the questions are similar, like the key metrics and some of the success criteria, etc. But Vijay, we'll come back to you with some of more questions, and we'll send it. I'd like to thank the audience for being patient and listening till the end. Thank you to Vijay and Alkesh for the support in getting this organized, and also WebHub and the team for ensuring that all of you get communication on a regular basis. So thanks a lot, Vijay, and thanks a lot all the participants who were on the call. We will definitely come back to you. We have recorded this session, so we'll also send you the recorded session in case you miss some parts and you want to review them. Thank you so much and have a great evening. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Sunil. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Vaibhav.